Thank you very much for that. About 2 years ago, I stumbled into a meeting over in Whitelands on feedback for students, which is something close to my heart. I came here from school. I taught in schools for 27 years, where marking was something you did like this. You went tick, flick, tick, flick, tick, flick. Shh, no, we didn't do that, of course. Suddenly, I was confronted with these assignments, which I was supposed to give written feedback on. As subject leader, I was looking at the feedback I was getting from my colleagues, and to be frank with you, it wasn't very good. And I heard about this system of giving audio feedback to students' assignments. So I started trying it out. The main thing I wanted to do was improve the quality of the feedback the students given. I don't know about you, in our School of Education, if you write a 4,000-word master's assignment, you get 10 lines. What can you say in 10 lines of 4,000 words? The other thing we'd noticed, or I'd noticed, that having done all this feedback, put it all available for the students to collect, about a third of the students never, ever bothered to collect it. And that made me think, what's going on here? And I just thought it wasn't a good use of my time. So we thought, well, let's try doing this a different way. After I started it, Sue came in and set up a proper project. So.
No, it's not a proper project, but it's part of my RU cert, and so I thought, well, I've seen Keith doing his feedback, and I thought, wow, what a really good way of doing it. So as part of my RU cert, I thought, right, this is going to be my project. So I'm doing it with 4 Year 3 groups who are finalists now, and so they've had the first 2 years just having written cover sheet feedback. So I thought, let's do a comparison between how they feel about getting digital feedback to the previous 2 years of cover sheet typed feedback. And so I've set up a study, and when I've finished marking, I'm right in the middle of it at the moment, but when I finish marking, I'm then going to email them their digital audio feedback. And then I'm going to ask them to a very, very brief questionnaire, because you know what like Year 3s are like at the end of term, to say, what did you feel, how did you feel about the digital as opposed to the written feedback? Now, I was very lucky in the RU cert because Joe Pete, very kindly, gave me a copy of some research that's already been done by the Leeds Met, who are leading 3 or 4 other universities. And there were about 28 to 30 or lecturers who were giving feedback, testing out the new equipment. And this is the new equipment. It's that. And so I'll come back to that in a minute, but why it's so easy to use, because you can sit there with an assignment and you don't have to be stuck into a computer. So, but Keith will probably go on a bit more on that bit. But they were looking at, Leeds Met were looking at whether or not digital feedback, audio feedback, saves assessors time than typing, and whether it provides a richer feedback. And the results of their study shows that the students were overwhelmingly positive with it, because they said it was more personal and it related to them, to their writing, and also, as the Professor Mont York, was that his name this morning, mentioning the emotional support. And I think the way that we've been doing the feedback is there's some support there which they can take on board, because we're kind of like, we've got a picture of them in front of us kind of as we're marking their assignment, and it's very personal. So they loved it, the students in this project, and there were a few that just preferred the written feedback, and a few more who wanted both. And I was thinking, saving assessors time. It didn't always save time, they found out, in terms of the assessor's time using these things, because you have to, A, get to know the technology, which is easy, actually, and B, you have to then tape it, save it, email it, etc. So I'm not sure how much time it does actually save, but I think in forms of assessment is a much better way of giving feedback. And the next steps, I think, are to look at, if they do want written feedback, what are these things called? Speech-to-text software. So I can speak into this, and then my computer, once I've trained it to recognise my voice, can then not only take on my voice, but type it out for me. You have to say full stop and comma and put in the punctuation a little bit, but I think perhaps that's the next step. Anyway, so I'm doing this feedback, and once I've got the feedback from the students, I'm I'm then going to, which is the qualitative side of the RU Cert, I'm then going to have a sort of write it all up, and then I'm going to do a bit of quantitative study of having a look at the simple question, like, dislike. And I think it's going to be a great project, and I'm really looking forward to receiving their feedback.
Because I've been doing this sort of unofficially, and of course the trouble with that is that dreadful word consistency, you know, across the programme comes in. I tend to hide a little bit, but I just thought to say a little bit about what I've experienced with that. Part of this came from a personal response, because one of the things anybody who knows me will know that, you know, you cannot read my handwriting. It is terrible. And when I started looking at these comments, they were dreadfully bland that the students were given. Now, if I just give you an example of why I think that was. In my own circumstances, this is not unusual. In the next 8 working days, I have to read 250,000 words written by students and feedback on it, whilst I'm doing a full programme of school visits. So how do I get this written feedback better? How did I get this feedback better? I thought, just tell them about their essays. Just talk into it so they can hear it straight away. In terms of time management, I think it's time neutral. Where it probably saves is if you are in the School of Education, you get 10,000 sheets at the end, which have to be sorted and filed. When you start adding that into the time equation, it is certainly saving time. It's convenience and mobility. I had to go to the doctors yesterday. You know what doctors are like. 40 minutes late, sat in the waiting room, I did 3 of them. The person next to me thought I was totally bonkers, but that didn't really matter. And I've used it so far with BA undergraduates, PGC secondary science, which is master's level work, and PGC primary practice, which is also master's level work. As Sue says, the device is small. I've got one very similar, just a different model. Very easy to use. It has files in it, so you can keep things in files. I have a file for each group. It's a simple USB thing. You plug it into your computer, download it, put it onto the central drive, and you've got your records stored and ready. It is very, very easy to use. What you do need to use is the pause button and realise you can pause. 1 or 2 of mine have been paused whilst I bought duty-free on aeroplane flights, things like that. But it has worked very well. My preliminary outcomes were that the students loved the detail. You can go into an argument about page 3, paragraph 2, where you say, and that is a wonderful sort of dialogue you set up with the students. It's much more holistic. You're looking at each assessment criteria, and then you can pull it all together. And there's a much richer and more diverse use of language in that feedback. I did a little feedback from the students. I did do a questionnaire, overwhelmingly positive. Overwhelmingly positive. The other thing is, which they loved, was the day the marks were released was the day the feedback was emailed. So they got an immediate response as soon as we possibly could. I was looking at that turnaround this morning, thinking the idea of turning around working 2 weeks, my heart was sinking. Students say they listened to it more than once. And with students with low who have failed, what I found is actually they didn't need the tutorial. The tutorial was still offered, but there was enough detail in the feedback for them to be able to set about straight away on their resubmissions. And I think that was a great positive.
Can we just leave that on and stop?
Stop. Oh, there's your negatives.
Thank you ever so much.